You mentioned a couple reasons why the convention process was favored as opposed to ratification by the legislatures, which was provided by the Articles of Confederation. Can you elaborate a little bit more as to the political reasons? You were talking more about philosophical reasons, popular sovereignty, etc., and also expanding the electorate by getting rid of property qualifications and making more people eligible to vote. But are there any other political reasons why it would be expedient to go into ratifying conventions?
Well, for one thing, the framers certainly looked at the past example of the Articles of Confederation. In order to amend anything in the Articles of Confederation, the states had to have a unanimous vote in order to get anything amended to the Articles of Confederation, which they realized was nearly impossible to do. They realized that in order to have the ratification of the Constitution to be a more practical system, they were going to do it directly to the state conventions and the people, not to the state legislatures.
I think that one of the philosophical reasonings and the political reasons are two sides of the same coin. George Mason and Edmund Randolph had a system that they proposed previously for the ratifying, where it would first go to the Confederated Congress, then it would go to the state legislatures, and then the state conventions. And now dissenters of this said that, first of all, it was not politically expedient. They were under a government that wasn't protecting rights. The Confederation was obviously a failed government. And that we needed the popular sovereignty. James Madison remarked that in a free government, the people must be the ultimate sovereigns.
And it was more than that also, because this had to do with state sovereignty, and to bring it to the state legislatures would be to reaffirm the kind of ultimate state sovereignty that they had under the Articles of Confederation. But also, the framers did not want to bring it to the state legislatures, because in that way it would seem like any other law, and then it could be null and void, just like any other law could be easily repealed. So they didn't want to put it on the same footing as any other piece of legislation, since this was the supreme document.
Madison even references that the true difference between a constitution and a treaty is that a treaty would be the one that would be ratified by the state legislatures, whereas a constitution would be inherently ratified by the people.
And why is that?
Well, because the thing is, as Raina said, that in a treaty, when you have the state legislatures ratifying it, that'd be ratifying it as any other law previously, whereas if it's on the backbone and through the strength of the people, it truly is exemplary of the governing body, which is the people in our nation.
And I think that it was extremely important to bring this to the people after an aristocratic class had drafted the Constitution. You really needed the people to get involved and to feel as though they're part of the process, so that they'd feel loyal to their new union.
One of the political reasons they decided to forego having the Confederated Congress pass it, or the state legislatures for that matter, was that the political interest of keeping the same government would ensure that they would remain in their positions, in their power, and that's not something that someone would want to give up.
You can even see another political reason being that if they kept to the state legislatures, the Federalists who really wanted to have the Constitution ratified would have a much harder time trying to get their opinions out to the people if it was put in the state legislature. There'd be enough anti-federalists to mount opposition in the state legislatures as to make the ratification of the Constitution almost impossible. So if you leave it to the people, that's how we got the debates in the press, and that's how the Federalists were able to have that open debate and challenge the anti-federalists in saying, this is the government for the people, and this is the government that's going to lead our nation away from the failed government under the Articles of Confederation.
So you're really saying that Madison's talking about what a great idea it would be to have it ratified by the people rather than the legislatures was really a self-serving statement.
No, well, Amar
It's a political imperative to do it rather than just being good government.
Amar talks about it as being, Professor Kirat Amar talks about it as being a merging of practicality and principle. So I don't think it's just one of them, but I think the principles of popular sovereignty.
Do you think it was more practicality or principle?
I mean, I think the principle was definitely important. To have the phrase "we the people" and then not have the people consent to it, I think would have been incredibly hypocritical. But so I think that was probably paramount. But but you know, you definitely cannot ignore that there were definitely political reasons behind the ratification.
I agree with Raina. I think that the main reason why the people had to get involved was because you're leaving from a government. You're leaving a government that did not represent its citizens, and I think that it was of the utmost important that the people did feel as though they were included in the new country.
For one thing, when you want to even look at the Articles of Confederation, when it was drafted in 1776, the people of our nation didn't even ratify the Articles of Confederation, and the Articles of Confederation ended up governing our people until this Constitution was drafted. And the framers realized that if you want to even make a marked difference between our Constitution and the Articles of Confederation, that we are going to leave it to the people to ratify it, and we are going to have a people governing the system.
Why did many writers use the pseudonyms in the ratification documents or debates?
They used the pseudonyms because, in my opinion, I think that they didn't want to have that much influence over the people as to really sway their opinions. If they saw someone like James Madison or people of the aristocratic class voicing their opinions in favor of the Constitution, many of the ordinary citizens of our country would probably just look at it and say, this is just an aristocratic person voicing their opinions. How is that going to help me? If they, by using the pseudonyms, the people were able to get differing opinions on the debate, but not biases based on classes.
And there's also the practical reason when you know a person uses pseudonyms, there's an anonymity behind that, and you know they won't face direct criticism because they don't know who the writer is. There's still questions about who wrote Federal Farmer. So yeah, I think there's a practical reason behind that as well.
You think it's a good idea or a bad idea?
I think that it's a great idea. I think that people should be identifying with principles and not necessarily allying them with specific people, and they should be able to filter through these pieces that were written and still be able to identify which belong to which anonymous writer, but even so be able to understand the principle underlying the writing.
I
You all
think,
agree with that?
Yes.
yes.
I would definitely agree with that. I mean, there are definitely psychological reasons why people would align with one person rather than another, just because, not because of the principles, but because of their association. So I think any way to detract from that is a good idea.
Like, what a great name to use the name Publius, the people, the public. And when they're writing on behalf of the federal papers, they're saying that we're the people. We're not this aristocratic class, even though there's debate over whether or not they may be. They're the people. This is the people's government and the people's system. And they're writing it in this language and distributing it out to the people for everyone to see and read. This is what the system is. This is an explanation, a defense of the system for the people.
I even wish today that when it comes to many of our political issues that we face, that more people would use pseudonyms, and I really take that position because many people in this country, as soon as they hear certain opinions from who it comes from, whether it be Bill O'Reilly from Fox News or Keith Olbermann from MSNBC, they immediately have that inclination of what that person's views are going to be. And sometimes when they know that, instead of listening to the argument, they just immediately turn off the television or shun away from the argument, not trying to hear it because of their certain political views. If we use pseudonyms today more often, then I think we'd even have a better system of government where we have the people not so biased by the expansion of the media that's taking place today.